Right, so we mentioned in an earlier video types, and this is when we need to be more specific about what we're storing in our variables, or when we use those variables, we need to be specific about what kind of information data they contain. So Python understands several different types. So int is just an integer, a whole number. str for string will just give you a string of text, alphanumeric text. You can also have things like float, which will provide you with a decimal place. So those are the three main ones. Now you can see here what I've set up are three variables that each contain a number. And we know they're numbers because they're coming up red rather than strings, which are coming up green. Now, you can see what happens if I want to print, small p, if I want to print the same as we did before, the age of these stored variables for John age and Jim age. Okay, and I'm also going to add that to Shamima's age. Okay, now what that will do is that will basically, well, it asked me the question, what is your age? Because I've got some input here. But it's then basically saying 31. Why is it 31? Well, because 10 plus 10 plus 11 is 31. So if I was to take Shamima out of there, it wouldn't add in that extra 10. So we should get 21. So we run that. What is your age? Okay, 21. That's right, 10 plus 11, 21. Now, what is this bit here doing? Mike input, what is your age? Now, it's letting me type in my own age, and I put in here 22. So 22 is now stored in Mike age. So let's uncomment this and see what happens when I try and print Mike age and John age. So what I should get is whatever I type in here added to the age of John 10. Okay, so if I type 22 again, should technically end up with 32. But here's what happens. What is my age? 22. Enter. Oh, we've got a problem. And this is why types are important. Why have we got a problem? Well, it tells us here file string on line 10. What does that mean? Type error. Can only concatenate strings, not integers to strings. Okay, it's a bit sounding like it's gobbledygook, but what that means is basically it's trying to add a string 22 text to a number, and you can't add numbers and text together because it won't let you. Okay, so what we need to do is in some way convert the string that I input when I type 22 for my age. We need to convert that type from a string to a number, to a whole number, to an integer. So the easiest way we can do that is we define it. We can do it here when we do the input. And normally you can just wrap the type around what you want the input to be. So I could just say int and then wrap that whole thing in some curly braces. So what does that mean? Well, that means my age is now the input, but it's now going to be stored as an integer. So let's try it. My age is 22. Oh, look, no, it's giving me 32. Why? Because it's not a string anymore. It's now an integer. So we can define these things as strings or as integers or as floats when we create them, or we can do it when we use them. Okay, so I could, in theory, here print int Mike age and then add that to John age. Okay, and I get the same thing, because whether we convert it here when we create it, when we define it rather, or whether we convert it from a string to an integer here when we use it, there's still a conversion going on. It probably makes more sense to do it here. But again, depending on the context of your program, you might find it more useful to actually change it to an integer when you use it inside a function or a class or something like that. So just be aware, if you get that type error message comes up, it's quite often because it's trying to convert something. And when you start writing bigger programs, there are ways sometimes that you can you're going to get that error, and there's not much you can do about it apart from use a built-in method within Python to basically tell it what to do if that error comes up. So sometimes you can't prevent the error, but you can tell Python what to do if that error appears. We'll get back to that later. But for now, I just want you to understand this concept of variables can be defined as integers or as strings or as floats. And because Python doesn't ask you when you define the variable which one it is, sometimes you have to tell it. Sometimes you do that when you define it, sometimes you do that when you use it. But if you don't, and then you try to use it somewhere and you can't, you will just get that error.